Steve Bowers, welcome you to a conversation here at E Plus TV6. We're at the home of Stan Perkins, joined by Wayne Collins, and we'll call him Gator. Is that okay? That'd be fine. Stan Perkins. Appreciate y'all doing this.
Thank you for being here, man.
We don't have any idea where this is headed, but we're going somewhere, right? We're going somewhere. But we're going to start with a Jacksonian, Brother Dave Gardner. What got you interested in him? Because you mentioned him to me a few months ago.
Well, you know, I knew of Dave Gardner back when I was a kid, 9 or 10 years old. My dad brought an album called Rejoice, Dear Heart, and I can remember him playing and laughing. And Dave had one of his stories, Little David was the name of it, about David and Goliath.
Okay.
And he had in the story about he put a rock in his blue suede tennis shoe tongue, and so one of those things. And I can remember my dad really enjoying that. I mean, it was funny. Mm-hmm. And then I got back into him by just happenstance by looking on the computer, going through YouTube.
All right. Okay.
I like to watch television on mute. And then I put my Bluetooth headphones on, and I'll get on my computer, especially YouTube, and just going from one thing to another, and something popped up with him, and then that popped up in my mind. Okay. And I knew that he was from Jackson. I knew that when I was 9 or 10 years old, when we had that album, that he was originally from this town, and then I got to studying more about him.
You feel like he's kind of been neglected here or overlooked here?
I think definitely so. I mean, Dave Gardner was a national star who appeared on The Night Show, who had 3 top 10 albums. I mean, comedy albums. He was huge. He played a lot of the colleges, the Ivy League schools. He played colleges all over America, and was loved. And he was a little bit off the edge with his stuff. And crazy is a good word. Man, you know all about that, don't you? And I mean, we've been in the music business.
That's right.
So, I mean, I just really got into it, and I wanted to find out more of the history of him. I even went in search of where he's buried here, his gravesite here in Jackson. Like to never found the cemetery.
Because it's not marked. His grave is not marked.
And he specifically asked it not be marked.
Okay. The thing that turned out in this, and this is where Wayne comes in with us, is that Dave Gardner was a drummer and had a hit record.
Right.
Yeah.
He had a
before he got into comedy.
Yeah, with the White Silver Sands, that was his first success in music. I don't think he ever had a follow-up to that as far as singing, but he was a very good singer. But as far as his musical ability, he was an outstanding drummer, jazz drummer, and played on a lot of sessions. I don't know of the names of the jazz singers that he backed up on drums, but he was just a very talented guy.
So you met him how?
Well, I was about in junior high, and his grandmother and his aunt lived on the corner of Mitchell Street and Old Medina Road or Campbell, and lived in a big white house. Well, I lived on Bryant Street, which was a couple of blocks up. And so I would play baseball on that lot next to the big house where the Gardner's house was. So I found out from them that they had a son and a relative named Dave Gardner. So I got to thinking about, and this was years later. So I went down there one day, and he was coming in from California where he was living. And I didn't know he was a drummer at that time. And we got to talking. He said, yeah, I was a drummer. He said, I played with a bunch of big names. I said, hey, I'm a drummer too. I said, I got my drums up the house. I said, would you play my drums if I brought them down here? He said, no, we will play those drums. So I brought him down there. He put a record on a turntable that he had in the house, and he would play a while and then I would play a while,
Okay.
and he would play a while. So I got to know him really well. So every time he would come in from California, he had my phone number. He would call me and tell me he was in town. I would go down there,
Okay.
and we would play. So I knew him real well from that, and up until he died.
Were you aware of how big a star he was at that time, or?
Yes, I was somewhat aware that he was big,
Big time, okay.
but I didn't know that he had all this other
Music
things
background,
going
okay, yeah,
on
okay.
like he did. He was big, playing all over the world.
Right.
I knew he was also a comedian, and I'd heard some of his stuff that he did, which I thought was very funny. But when we were together, he didn't want to talk about him being a comedian. He just wanted to talk about music,
okay.
wanted to talk about drums. So I thought that was neat, me being a drummer and meeting somebody that was good. Then I got to talking to folks later on and found out how good he really was.
Okay.
And he was very excellent. And he had started out at Union University years ago. And when he was at Union University, he played for some of the shows and stuff at Union. And then later from there, it took off from there. But he had bands around here in Jackson before he got moved into California. But he played all around, especially in the state of Tennessee. He played a lot of venues and a lot of places he played at around here before he ever moved to California. And when he got big in comic, him being a comic, that's when he moved to California.
Okay.
So
he was a working musician in this area.
So do what?
He was a working musician.
He was a very good working musician. So he could do most
You
anything.
had to be really good to be a working musician.
He could sing, he could play drums.
Well, how did the drumming start for you then? Because
I guess I perceived it might be the easiest thing to learn to do. And if you're going to play music.
Okay.
But it turned out to be one of the hardest things because physically it was. But W.S. Holland, who started out with my dad in '54, and would come to the house, and I always just liked the drums, the rhythm part of playing. And I got my first set of drums at 14 years old. It was bought at Wallach Music Company at that time, and
is that right? Okay.
and so. But I also liked playing guitar, but I didn't start learning playing guitar until later on, and probably.
When did you actually start working with Carl then?
1976. My dad worked with John Cash from 1967, early '67, until through 1975, and then he and John parted ways. In a friendly way. Okay. And my dad decided he wanted to go back out, and he asked my brother and I if we would go along with him. I don't know if it was because we were that good or that we were going to be that cheap. Probably the latter.
We're going to pick this story up. Right. Stan Perkins is with us, and Wayne Collins with us as we continue here at E+ TV 6.
What this place needs is better graduation rates.
What this place needs is less childhood obesity.
What this place needs is free help with taxes.
What this place needs is healthy breakfast.
What this place needs is fitness programs for kids.
What this place needs is early readers.
What this place needs is mentors for teens.
What this place needs is people to join us. What this place needs is you. To donate or volunteer, go to unitedway.org.
Welcome back to this conversation at E+ TV 6. We're at the home of Stan Perkins. Wayne Collins has joined us. We got two drummers here. I don't know where we're going, but we're going to pick it up. We got to go. You said we've been talking a long time this day before we started rolling all this this video that you kind of hit all the honky tonks when the honky tonks were honky tonks, and Stan said he kind of got in on the end of it because he's going to wind up in Europe playing at Royal Albert Hall or something. All right. So what was the music scene like when you got into it? You start drumming at 12. So what's your first professional work then?
Well, I started in junior high
All right.
as a drummer in the 7th grade. And I used to practice beating on everything in my mother and daddy's house till I ruined the couch and everything else, beating on them on my sticks. Then when I got in 8th grade, I got in the Jackson High School band.
All right.
So I played from 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and then my senior year I made all-state as far as drums. But when I was 14, I got a trap set, my first trap set, from Wallach Music Company. They were good friends. The Sipes and the Wallachs were all good friends, and my cousin Gerald McGuire, who recently passed away, also was working down there. But then I got the trap set, so I started playing locally with bands. And you said the beer joints. Yes, I played all of them and around Jackson and all over the state.
So you were playing with whom and what were the places?
Well, I mean, I played with Tony and Embers. I played with the Marvells. I played with the Epics, who was T.G. Shepard back then. He was Billy Browder then, and lived at Humboldt, and later became Brian Stacy. Then Elvis named him T.G. Shepard.
All right.
And then so I played with him, and then I got hooked in with Carl, with his daddy Carl. I played with Carl. I played with Carl Mann. I played with a lot of the locals around here. Everybody knew each other as far as the music business. And they knew the musicians and the people over in Memphis. So I kind of got hooked in over in Memphis and West Memphis, Arkansas. So I got to play over in the joints over there, like the 1600 Club, the Vapors, the Bad Bobs, West Memphis, Arkansas, with Danny's Club and the Cotton Club and the Plantation Inn. And through that, I was at a birthday party one night for Roy Orbison at Danny's Club. And Eddie Bond was there, and I knew Eddie from being in the radio business from years before. Eddie got me hooked up with Carl. I played 5 gigs with Orbison all over Arkansas, which I thought was neat. So I kind of got big time from there with different groups. I was known as a substitute drummer.
Okay.
If they needed a drummer and their regular drummer couldn't play, most of the time they would call me because I kept up with the music business pretty well and knew what songs was being played, so I could sit in on drums.
Okay. That was smart.
So that was me. I didn't play for years like Fluke played with his daddy and then with Carl Mann and then John Cash. But I played.
But then you did a lot of work. Then.
I did a lot of work.
Okay.
I did studio work. I did.
So you were in studio as well.
I was studio work. I recorded at Sun and Phillips and Lou and High and Satellite Fernwood. Recorded at Fernwood, which was Scotty Moore's place, in his backyard. He had a studio. But all the people over there got to complaining because of all the cars and all the music and that. So he had to build another studio downtown and then later on
went
in
to
Nashville.
Okay.
And then I recorded at WTRO, a Holiday Inn record. And so
where was it?
But it was at Dyersburg.
Dyersburg, okay.
But a lot of these studios, most of them came really to Sun or Phillips to record, and they'd slap another label on it, like Klondike and Holiday Inn and all those.
So they were recording out of those.
They would record primarily at Sun or Phillips. And then
were they selling those songs off, or those artists off, or just creating subsidiary labels? Or?
Right. So they would put another label. So people own labels that they would get people to perform at those studios, but they'd stick another label on it. Wow. So you may not. You might think it was their own studio, but it really wasn't.
Okay.
And then Jackson had 3 or 4 studios. One of them was off of between Mitchell Street and Weber, really in Weber Street in the backyard of somebody's house. Slick Glisten, who also was a drummer, and his son I helped start in the music business and the drum. And so those studios there went
there was that
places.
studio, and you said there were a couple more.
And then the one ended up over on Morgan Street. And
who was it?
And,
you remember?
I'm trying to remember the name of it. But Tommy Exum, who is here with us today, his daddy Jimmy is the one started all of them.
Okay.
He's the one. And Jimmy Exum has been in the music business for years and years. Jimmy was the manager of a group called the Marvells, which we were at Lambeth College with the Marvells. That's where it started. And we had records, but several drummers played with them.
So these were rock and roll bands?
These were rock and roll bands before we were known as rockabilly.
Okay.
But we were rock and roll back then.
This was 50s, 60s?
This was 58, 50, 57, 58, 59, 60, around in those years.
So y'all were playing here? Were they playing colleges?
We were playing at a lot of colleges.
Okay.
We were playing at school, high school dances. We were playing and different things all over West Tennessee, especially.
Okay. That's one side of this business. You walk into it in 1976 with Carl Perkins.
Right.
Right? Which, all right, pick that story up then. Did you get your father's band, and what happens to Stan Perkins then?
What happened to Stan Perkins in 1976?
Yeah.
Go ask somebody. Maybe they'd be able to tell you. No, I started in 76 with my dad. The first show we did was in Alexandria, Louisiana. Willie Nelson was a headliner.
Okay.
He was huge with Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. That Texas outlaw scene was really
hitting,
catching fire with the country music thing. So this was a Coliseum. Needless to say, myself and everybody in the group except for my dad.
Who else was in the group with you at that time?
At that time, it was my brother Greg.
Right.
Greg was 17 when he started in the band. I was 23.
Okay.
And there was a guy by the name of Lee McAlpin,
keyboard.
Who lives in Middleton, Tennessee, who's still alive today. At that time, I'll take that back. I didn't play the first few shows on drums. I played guitar.
Guitar, okay.
And we had another guy that played drums. But getting back to that first show, this place was probably a 10,000-seat Coliseum. Scared to death. Man, that's scary. It was not like these dying honky-tonks I got to play. This was a different world here.
Right.
And so we did the first show, and then the next night was here at Jackson, at the Jackson Coliseum, which is Oman Arena now, but it was Jackson Coliseum at that time, along with Willie Nelson. T.G. Shepherd was also on that show, and I'll tell a funny story. It turned out to be funny. It wasn't funny that night. Willie was the star of the show, and they had security around there, and they wouldn't let Willie in. They didn't know who he was.
Well, it's okay.
And I mean, Willie dressed as only Willie Nelson dressed, with his pigtails and all like that. And they thought he was some kind of bummer. He kept banging on the door and pointing towards the stage.
And they wouldn't let him in.
And finally, somebody said, "That's Willie Nelson. He's the star of the show."
Let him in.
And they did let him in, and he, But that was the first couple of gigs we played.
Sometimes it takes us a while in Jackson to catch up, but we finally did let Willie in the house. We'll be right back as we continue this conversation with Wayne Collins and Stan Perkins here at E+ TV6.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Or that the projections would be tornado next Thursday.
I can't do Thursday, but I can do Friday.
Disasters don't plan ahead. You can. Talk to your loved ones about how you're going to be ready in an emergency.
Welcome back to this conversation at the home of Stan Perkins. Stan Perkins and Wayne Collins with us, and we're just talking music and memories and all these different things. So you were telling about Nashville, that you finally got involved with the studios in Nashville.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, I ended up having some friends that was doing some recordings in Nashville.
All right. They have some pretty good studio musicians in Nashville. Yeah.
Also, there was a band called, yes, very much. The band used to come to Jackson that backed up Brenda Lee.
Okay.
It was the Nashville Casuals. Well, when I was at Lameth
They would come here and play.
They would come here and play for fraternity parties.
Okay.
So I knew them all, the Casuals, who was a road band for Brenda, and I knew them all, and I'd sit in with them. Well, when I was in Nashville years later, and so the piano player who was the stage manager said, "What are you doing for the summer?" I said, "Nothing. I guess I'll go find a job in Jackson." He said, they needed a drummer at the Jolly Roger, which later became the captain's table. So I ended up playing drums there. And by playing drums at the Jolly Roger, the Kitty Wells, Farron Young, Jimmy Dickens, Merle Travis, Kitty Wells, all the old-timey people from the Ryman would be with us. Then they would get a call, then they would walk down to the Ryman Theater and perform.
Play the show. To play the
One thing about Farron Young, they would call down there and say, "Farron, you need to be on stage in about 15 minutes. He said, "I'll get there when I get there." So they did not mess with Farron Young. So
That's a live radio show.
So I got hooked in to the Nashville scene. So I got to play at Studio B, Nashville at one time because they wanted our bass player, our lead guitar player, and me to play on a record at Studio B, RCA. Well, they had already got Boots Randolph, who was playing at Skulls Rainbow on the other end of the alley, to play saxophone. They got the Jordanaires to sing background. Floyd Kramer was out on Percy Priest Lake fishing. Well, he was a studio musician. They called him in. He was mad, really mad. He didn't want to talk to anybody. Ray Stevens, it was his first year in Nashville. Ray came in the studio, wasn't even supposed to be a part of any of it. Ray was during the song making sounds with his mouth like playing trumpet and playing different instruments, which I thought was really funny. And so we recorded this thing, but the record never came out.
Well, who was the vocalist, her?
So it's hard for me to remember who the vocalist was.
Okay.
But
pretty good.
But it was a very good vocal. I mean, it was a very good instrumental part anyway.
Okay.
And I can't remember exactly who all was doing the vocals, but the Jordanaires was backing them up.
Somebody put some money into that session.
But we all got we all got union.
Right.
You know. We got our part left. I don't know what the big names got, but we just got minimum wage, you might say, for playing. So a lot of those, if Chet Atkins approved of you back at that time, then you could record in Nashville. If he did not approve of you, it was very difficult for putting any kind of record out in Nashville. Buddy Killen, I knew Buddy real well. He did a lot of artists, including T.G. Shepherd, which I knew very well, and so Buddy would own Trees record and part of other studios that he had a part of, because he owned about half of downtown Nashville anyway. But that's basically how I got into all of that, recordings and playing live music and whatever.
While we got you here, I want to get back to Jackson for a minute. You said that you could name places where people play, because Stan was too young in those days. You know, y'all were playing where?
The big thing was what you call a supper club, which was on 45 South.
Okay. Now you're nodding, so you got recollection
I've
of that?
heard of it.
Okay.
I didn't. I never got to go there.
And it had been
That was
there,
uptown.
It had been there for years and years.
And it was the supper club.
Raymond Davis was the guy that owned it.
30s and 40s.
In the 30s and 40s.
And Southside High School was just past there up on the hill. And
well, Jimmy Evans was talking about in the latter days of that club that Philip Reynolds and all those people played there, right? People come from all over.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So, in fact, when I was a senior in high school, Philip Reynolds' drummer, Robert Hall, passed out in the parking lot, and I happened to be there, and I played the last 2 hours
that
of
right?
the show.
The show with Philip Reynolds. Okay.
And the people that played,
Well, that's
Red
it.
Matthews played lead guitar, and he played behind his neck and all different. He was a showboat musician. So I didn't get paid, but I played for a couple of hours for that show.
Well, that'd be worth doing.
It was basically, it was nice. But they put petitions and stuff out saying it was too close to a high school to have
So they closed
liquor.
it down. Okay.
So he had to move. He moved the club out where the VFW on 45 North is now. He called it the Capri.
Okay.
And they tore those buildings down, but still on that particular site.
Okay.
The Elks Club down in the basement is
the
where
Elks
a
Club
lot
downtown,
of musicians
okay.
played there. If you went out 45 South, you got the Winking Pig, was on where N.C. Edwards later became.
Okay.
And it was also known as the Chatterbox. Then you went out further out. You had different clubs.
There was a Cotton Bowl out there somewhere, right down in Henderson.
You get 45 Club was past Bemis, and it was they burned it the first time. They built it back, and then they blew it up the next time. But if you went down into Magic Valley, the Cotton Bowl was in Magic Valley, down there by where Duck's Market is now.
Today, okay.
And then up on the hill where Dwayne Seaton's place is, up all the way up in the woods, just past his place, and there's a road going down between it. Back in the woods, it was the YN. Then if you went on down into Henderson, there was another nightclub, and I cannot remember the name of it.
Okay.
But you had to get Freed owns it now, but you went down the hill and up the hill. It wasn't even supposed to have been open, but they was having a party. And I was playing drums, and his daddy was singing.
Okay.
And we had different musicians. Well, Carl left, I left at the same time Carl did, and we pulled down, and when we pulled out onto 18, the sheriff's department, the highway patrol, the Henderson, everybody showed up, and they arrested everybody that was in that building.
Okay, but y'all got out.
We got out.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
What about the El Rancho?
El Rancho was on 70.
Okay.
It had a little, WS ended up with that little
Stage, right? This
stage.
It's at the
And
Carnegie
stage,
now.
The
right.
stage was about 10 foot by 4 feet.
Okay.
I had to take my drums and stick them sideways to put my drums up there.
Okay.
And it was a nice place. On 45 North, when you went out 45 North, Del Mar was on the left-hand side, just past where the drive-in theater was at that time. There's pine trees. I think it's a tractor place now.
Wow.
Next to it. And then Doc Silver Star was on the right-hand side. And then the first time I ever played drums out with a trap set was with Ken McDaniel, who's still playing.
Right.
When I was 14, at Doc Silver Star. And then on down, you had the Continental Club down there, where it's a tire place now, and people work on vehicles and whatever. So that was,
You said something else before we get away. You said something about playing at Bethel Springs at the high school down there, or the
Bethel Springs High School Gymnasium.
Okay. And you said who all had played there? Because Elvis played there.
Elvis played there, Jerry Lee Lewis played there, Roy Orbison played there, Charlie Rich played there. All you big stars.
Did Carl play there?
Carl played there.
Yeah, okay.
How I played there with Jerry Lee. How
That was the first place my dad saw Elvis.
Okay.
Was in Bethel Springs.
Bethel Springs. Okay.
And somebody had some connections. I don't know who
Somebody was a
it
local
was,
promoter,
but
right?
they had connections.
Okay.
And everybody played there.
That's walking, talking history right there. Right. I mean, because most people now in the city would not have any.
It sounds like there were as many honky-tonks as there was houses in Jackson.
I know of at least 20 honky-tonks.
Now it's all
Jackson.
churches and banks. But in those days, now it's honky. I appreciate you spending this time with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
We appreciate it very much. It's walking, living history these days. Thank you for being a part of this. We'll do more of this conversation at E+ TV6 with Stan Perkins and Wayne Collins.